Now, talking about the assessment, the to-do list, the harmonization of standards in order for ASEAN to embrace the economic integrity, then who will be the standard maker, and who would actually take the standard taker? Who will decide which be on site to take the lead in this harmonization of standards?
That's an open question, because we don't know.
Right.
What we know is that in order to have a level playing field, a global standard is the right option, because this is what provides producers with a single way of respecting precaution, whether it's health, food, whatever. But what we don't know is how to get there. And for the moment, a bit of that is done in some remits of the international system. Food safety, for instance, or animal health, or safety of planes. You have global standards.
Right.
But this is partial. And then you have the first of the negotiations of this new world of trade, which is this transatlantic negotiation between US and Europe, where most of the issue has to do with these standard approximation, harmonization, mutual recognition, whatever you call it, which has to do with regulatory convergence, so that if I'm a European car producer, I don't have to equip my cars with a big bumper to sell in the US, and if I'm a US car producer, I don't have to equip my car with a small bumper because that's the EU regulation. So that's a whole field of new standards, and the game is open. There is a possibility that if US and EU agree on standards for food, for animal welfare, for car safety, for data privacy, this will de facto become the world standard. Others will be standard takers, and EU and US will be standard makers, assuming they can do that. This implies a sort of equalization of the level of precaution and of the way you administer precaution. No. My own view, for what it's worth, is that the only way to equalize precaution is upwards. Regulators will only agree to take another standard if this other standard is higher than the one they have.
Okay.
So this notion that there is in some parts of public opinion, notably in Europe and US, that regulatory harmonization is about dumping precaution, in my view, is wrong. Because this, again, is in the hands of regulators, and regulators will always look for the maximum level of precaution. But, the game is open, and at the end of the day, my own recommendation would be that this is addressed multilaterally. After all, if I'm an African or an Indonesian, I would prefer to sit at the table where the standards are decided.
And will this have to be also politically led?
And this would necessitate a new mandate for the World Trade Organization, who has a very clear mandate in import restrictions, a bit of a less clear mandate in export restrictions, and an even less clear mandate in harmonization of regulations. So this notion that this shouldn't turn to a sort of regulatory preference between two elephants of world trade, which others only will have the option to follow is, in my view, a potential problem, not least because there are the risks that the third big elephant, which is China, doesn't see things the same way.
Okay.
So take ASEAN countries. If there is a US-EU standard and if there's a Chinese standard, for ASEAN producers, this will be a problem because they will have to address both standards, which means segregate their production, which means renounce to economies of scale, which the same standard everywhere would provide. So if I'm not EU, US, or China, I think I would be quite adamant that this is done multilaterally with a single standard.
Okay. Now, in your view, in your opinion, in your observation, how prepared is ASEAN nation towards this economic integration? We don't expect a big bang that will happen in 2015, but where should it start, and where is the conversation at the moment? Because some of the business communities felt that the conversation remains at the top level and it has not trickled down to the business communities, small, medium enterprises. So how ready is ASEAN nation towards integration?
My European experience, and I spent 15 years integrating Europe, there is no big bang. It's a lengthy, sometimes a bit of a crab walking transformation that leads to more economic integration, more free trade, more common standards. Now, the more you move into convergence of precautionary measures which have to do with the administration of risk and precaution, the more populations, citizens care. Because this is sensitive. If I have the feeling that something I believe in, which is the health of my children, if I'm American, the health of my pets, or if I'm a philosopher about my privacy on files, electronic files, the more sensitive it is. So at the end of the day, I think this necessitates more transparency. And you need civil society, business people, and public authorities to work together with a sort of new coalition. Can't be just top-down, can't be just technicians or technocrats. It has to involve civil society and business, and there are civil society organizations, and there are business organizations, and there are public organizations.
Now, what are the best practices that we can learn from the convergence that EU has done, that ASEAN can emulate in order for us to economically integrate?
Well, I think although EU has its own specificities, EU integration is today the deepest and the most advanced, although it's happening and it happened under specific conditions of pressure and temperature which cannot be replicated elsewhere. But I think we've got that. I think in regulatory convergence, what the EU did starting 1985 until now, which is moving from the common market to an internal market, tells us a lot of how to do that. And notably on a complex option, which is whether, in order to address this problem of regulatory discrepancies, you follow the road of harmonization. So we finally adopt the same standard and the same way to enforce it, or whether we go the road of mutual recognition, which is another way of doing things. You have your own crash tests for cars. I have my own crash tests for cars. But because I trust you, I will accept that what you say is a safe car is good for me, and you will accept that what I say is a safe car is good for you. So that sometimes is the right way to do it, because it avoids this lengthy process of harmonization, but it implies a high degree of trust between you and me.
So that's trust is a very. Does EU play a role in assisting ASEAN towards integration? For instance, programs, fundings towards that integration.
Yes, I remember when I was EU Trade Commissioner, I was acting as a sort of advisor, consultant for ASEAN trade ministers, and when Laos or Vietnam or Myanmar sort of tried to move in this direction. I mean, EU, like ASEAN, by the way, helped a lot Vietnam to accede to WTO. Then EU, ASEAN, and Vietnam helped Laos to join the WTO. So there's been a good cooperation and good collaboration on this through capacity building. And I think overall, ASEAN has been quite efficient in helping its weaker, less developed members move up the scale of development, and probably more to come.
Who are now said to be the most aggressive and maybe probably the most ready towards ASEAN integration. And what would your direct your advice for the new government?
I don't give public advice to governments, especially when they don't ask. Good.
What would be? Thank you so much
pleasure.
for the interview. We will share with you the link.
So
the
let
print.
me know that. Send me your quotes.